everyone, welcome to my video. Before I get into the main event, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my inspiration for the project. So if your year has been anything like mine, you might have found yourself thinking about bread a little bit more than you ever did before. Personally, I've always really enjoyed baking, but I was never really able to sink my teeth into it as much as I wanted to until I found myself getting really bored in early quarantine. At that point, I finally found that I had enough time to devote myself to the complex art of bread making more than I ever had before. So I dove in, trying everything from sourdough to Thanksgiving rolls to sweetbreads for my roommates, which apparently is the only project that I've photographed. I will put it here. This is a banana bread that I made for my roommates a couple weeks ago. But because bread's been on the mind so much lately, when I started thinking about options for this project, I found myself wondering about the emergence of bread in the archaeological record. So a quick search actually showed me that this has been a very contested topic until fairly recently. Although bread is a versatile staple piece, some version of which exists in basically every culture today, its origins are still largely unknown. Typically, most archaeologists have thought of the advent of agriculture and the advent of bread making to be pretty paired events. The earliest findings of bread remains tend to be most often associated with Neolithic sites in Eurasia, oftentimes specifically in the Fertile Crescent. These sites have typically been fully fledged agricultural communities, leading to the assumed connection between the invention of bread and the advent of agriculture. However, there is ample evidence of stone tools being used to grind wild wheat, barley, grasses, and other starches way earlier than this, leading to the speculation that the invention of brewing, porridge, or maybe unleavened bread may have emerged as early as the Epipaleolithic period. However, there was very little empirical evidence to support any one of these theories until very recently. So that's where the site that I focused on for this project, Shubayqa 1 in modern-day Jordan, comes in. So this site was actually first published about in 2018 and is a pretty small site in terms of size. It has two main structures, the foundation of an ancient house and an accompanying fireplace. It was left by the some hunter-gatherer members of the Natufian culture. Remains, which have been identified as breadcrumbs, were found in the fireplace and dated to between 14.6 and 11.6 thousand years before present. When these were found and reliably dated, they became the earliest known definitive instance of bread. This discovery confirmed that the invention of bread predates the emergence of agriculture by at least 4,000 years. So, to learn a little bit more about the earliest known bread, I will be making some on my Paleolithic cooking show. Hey everybody, welcome to the cooking show. So to start off, I'll tell you a little bit about what the Natufian bread recipe likely would have been, just based off of the chemical analysis of the charred remains from Shubayqa 1. So it was just comprised of two simple ingredients. One, flour made from wild wheat, barley, and tubers, and two, water. So I'll start off by showing you the flour. For the flour, a chemical analysis of the breadcrumbs found at Shubayqa 1 indicated that they were made of both wild grains and tubers. So these materials would have been pounded into like a flour-like material using stone tools. Chemical analysis of the breadcrumbs also found that the grain size was super uniform. So this indicates that the flour was actually sieved before it was used to make it very similar to what we would have thought of as a modern flour. So archaeologists who worked on the excavation noted that it probably tasted very similar to a simple modern whole grain bread. So I'll be using this whole wheat flour to simulate what that would have tasted like. This flour would have then been mixed with some water to make batter or dough. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. Add this flour and water together. And I'll tell you a little bit about ratios and stuff while I mix it up. So I will be using just a simple half cup water to cup of flour ratio. The chemical analysis of the Paleolithic breadcrumbs did not indicate the presence of a leavening agent. So this suggests that the bread really resembled like a modern flatbread or pita. This was further supported by an analysis of the porosity of the breadcrumbs. So when you use a leavening agent, they allow the formation of larger air bubbles in breads. Typically, these air bubbles are larger than a millimeter and compose between 40 and 70% of the bread matrix in like a modern leavened bread. But in the breadcrumbs found at Shubayqa 1, they were only about 0.15 millimeters large and only comprised about 16% of the bread matrix. So because of that, I will not be adding a leavening agent to my bread either, and I will be cooking it like a flatbread. So here is the final product. A really simple dough that's probably very similar to the kind of dough that made the breadcrumbs found at Shubayqa 1. Because there were no ovens found at Shubayqa 1, these breads were most likely cooked over the fireplace or on hot stones nearby. So to simulate this, I'm going to be cooking this dough over medium heat in this pan. They likely would not have used oil in making these flatbreads, but I am a little bit worried about setting off the smoke alarm, so I'm going to use just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add this, which I've kind of shaped into like a little disc, to the pan, and just cook it over the oil for a little bit. And while I do that, I'll talk to you a little bit about how this bread probably would have been used during the Epi-Paleolithic period when it was first invented. So in the Epi-Paleolithic period, when these were first invented, they were probably only made for special occasions. The wild grains that they were made out of were pretty tough and difficult to manually prepare for flour making. So there's two primary lines of thought surrounding when these bread products would have been made. The first one is that they would have been made right before the group left the site because they were semi-nomadic people, to ensure that they would have a filling but lightweight food to bring with them on their journey. The second line of thought is that it was just for special occasions or for celebration. Either way, it was most definitely or almost definitely not an everyday fare. It's still a super exciting discovery though, because it marks the earliest known instance of not only bread making, which continues to be a really culturally important process today, but of true cooking and meal preparation. And here it is, my easy to make Paleolithic flatbread, recipe adapted from the site Shubayqa 1. Very delicious and perfect for wrapping your roasted gazelle in if you'd like to see what the first ever sandwich probably tasted like as well. Enjoy!